Everyone, many thanks for coming to our panel this morning. I know that we're being joined by people all around the world. I'm Kate McLean. I'm Professor of Feminist Geography at the Bartlett School of Planning at University College London. And I am the lowly social scientist on this panel, but a little bit more complicated than that. I've got a philosophy degree and then I moved through various routes into geography and planning. But my motivations for putting together this panel is really that I've always been very aware at how creative and academic practice should configure better. Like, my brother is a conceptual artist, and the way I often describe this in very kind of orthodox psychoanalytic terms is that he got or not even psychoanalytic, psychological terms, he got the right brain and I got the left brain. So I'm like the logical one who is very logocentric and will write stuff. And he's a creative artist with a PhD in creative practice as well. Right? So growing up, I've always been really aware that there are these two worlds, creativity and academic conceptual thinking. And I've always been a little bit shocked at the lack of engagement or the way that academics engage with creativity and what counts as knowledge production there. It is changing, so PhDs in creative practice, etc., etc. But I think there's a lot more work to do. And a lot more work to do in seeing how creativity can lead academic practice as well. So something else I've noticed is that everybody talks interdisciplinarity, but it's often because of the way universities configure the way science thinks of creativity, is that often means that the lead discipline is at the harder edge, like whether it's hard science or economics, or to use the language of diverse economies, it's the tip of the iceberg. Yep. And there's an awful lot to subvert, reconfigure, throw out, and redesign and reimagine in that way that knowledge production works. So that's my motivation one. And the second motivation is that we're living at a time that's variously called polycrisis or just a complete nightmare, really, where everyone agrees that we are out of ideas. Like social science is a pretty dismal place to be right now because everyone's talking crisis, whether it's of the economy or populist politics or various social inequalities that are reaching astonishing proportions. And what we need is a new imagining of the way the world works and what can be done. And I've been frequently in forums where the people who are crying out for this new imagining are said people at the harder edge of science. So political scientists, economists in my field, but they're not the go-to people. They're very clever and very good at other things, but they're not the go-to people when the problem is how to reimagine the world and how to recreate how things can relate and just different imaginaries of possibilities. The people who are expert here are the artists. Yep. So with that in mind, I thought of all the completely brilliant artists I know. Yep. And three of them are here today. And really, thank you so much for doing this. So I will introduce them briefly before handing over. First up is Helen Edling. Helen is an artist and curator based in Norrtälje, Sweden. She's founder of Lokalen Kulturverkstad, which I'm sure I've completely butchered in my pronunciation there, but I think it means culture workplace. Yeah, I'm getting a nod. Okay. But she'll be telling you more about that. And she's just completed an advanced research master's program at the Royal Institute of Art in Stockholm on 1,000 culture houses as well. Her practice centers around how a play aesthetic can carve out temporary in-between spaces that resist dominant social political narratives, and it can expand the horizon of what can be collectively imagined, articulated, and enacted. So you can see with my two motivations in mind for this panel why I thought of Helen. Like her work fits exactly into, what can we do now? Then next up will be Alan McFettridge. He's an artist and photographer and the founder of the Centre for Ecological Philosophy. I first came to know Alan's work with an exhibition he had in Hampstead in London on his work on the Fort McMurray wildfires in Canada in 2016, which was, from my understanding, it was kind of exactly what I've been talking about, as in like an artist-led interdisciplinary project that did include anthropology and geography as well. And I went away from that exhibition with an understanding of how photography can be about engagement and understanding rather than capture, which is how it's often thought of. And as Alan puts it, he sees image making that functions as inquiry and how that can unsettle extractive ways of seeing, which is what he'll be talking about today, among other things. And then finally, we have Dr. Neelambari Falke. She's an artist and researcher with a background in human and environmental geography, and she has just this week received a Developing Your Creative Practice grant from Arts Council England. So many congratulations. And part of the aim of this session is to provide some glimmer of hope in dismal times. And I forgot believing in grants. They kind of went out with Santa Claus. I haven't met anyone who's received a grant in a very long time. So really many congratulations. I think that's incredible. She uses artistic process as a way of listening, attuning to ecological rhythms, silences, and entanglements that data alone cannot convey. Yeah. So without further ado, I will hand over to Helen Edling. We've been practicing Zoom and screen sharing all morning, so hopefully this will work, but everyone knows how Zoom is, I think. So, but over to you,
Yes.
Helen.
Okay, I shall try. Share button there. Share and
Lovely. You just need to put the PowerPoint on full screen.
is it on now?
Perfect. Perfect. Great. I will put
Perfect.
myself on
Okay.
mute now.
Cool. How lovely to hear someone talk about you like that. Very, very nice. Yeah, I thought because will be in a room with high fly, very clever academics, I thought I keep it very, very non-academic and totally void of trying to make clever references and whatnot. Anyway, yes, you can see the little title I've given it here, Spaces of Play and Self-Organizing. So, as Kate said, I'm Helen Edling and I'm based in Norrtälje. It's just north of Stockholm in Sweden. I'll do this talk a little bit from like small scale to larger or micro to macro perspective. But to go straight into it, like I said, I'll keep this more in an artist way. So I keep it very simple, like I explain my practice when I do workshops with kids and I say, I play and I build things. That's it. We could stop the talk there. Now, but it may sound simple, but for me it holds a whole methodology. And I work with sculpture, drawing, and what I would call like spatial improvisation. So this is one of my smaller sculptures. Throughout the talk, I've just put sometimes slightly random pictures in just have a picture, and sometimes they really have a bearing on what I'm saying. But yeah, this is a tiny little sculpture with little ink drawing that I've slightly scored to see what happened. But I also work with people. I work with gatherings, shared making, collective experimentation, and like forms of being together that don't rely on like predetermined outcomes. For me, play, and it's a bit of a difficult word in English compared to in Swedish, because it can also mean, of course, play football, but that's not what we talk about. We talk about playing as in learning, but play is not something light or superficial. It's not an opposite of seriousness. Play is method. Play is a way of learning or paying attention, a way of imagining futures that are not there yet. Play can also be a strategy of resistance because it interrupts linear goal-driven orientated expectations, right? It opens space. It makes room for uncertainty, for surprise, and for emergence. So, starting at a smaller scale, the individual practice, the studio. I call it small world, small material, but because in my studio I work with very simple materials, like wood, paper, fabric, rope, bioplastic, mold, You can see here, this is sculpture that is slowly overgrown with mold. Just as a kind of an collaboration to give them all the chance to do what it wants with my sculpture. Very, very good collaborator. But generally materials that can like bend, stain, warp, decay, whichever, things that can change over time. I often build structures, small or large, which are sometimes like architectural fragments, sometimes scaffolds or stages, sometimes something between like furniture and landscape. But generally like unfinished and temporary, which means that they hold up a sense of possibility. So these are like small constructed worlds held together by care and attention. And they're not meant to be stable, but they breathe, they shift, and they change with touch, presence, and time. So at some point, I began to understand that what I was practicing with these like intimate materials was also something that I naturally did like practice socially, which was not clear from the beginning. But the idea that worlds where the material or social, are built together and always remain open to change. So it kind of led me to the Leaking Circus project, which is a framework for shared authorships and spatial discovery. So from the individual practice, I developed this and kind of widened the scope. And the Leaking Circus is not an institution in the conventional sense, of course, because there's no fixed membership, there's no stable program, there's no predetermined outcomes. More like a framework for project and for make space for shared authorship. So it's like a way of inviting others into the work. So one project I've created through the framework of the Leaking Circus is something that I called Once Upon a Space. This is something that I've done in a few different versions, but it always starts with an empty space and a load of set of various materials. In this one, the process was like visible from the street in this gallery for a little peephole in the frosted glass. So almost like a stage. And during this project, normally a project lasts for a week. I invited artists and makers as well as visitors to take part and to enter the space and be part of the process of creating something in the space, or to interrupt whatever was going in the space, or rebuild or add, dismantle or rearrange. So there were no rules for what could happen, and no fixed goals, of course, and no single author. This ends up being a collaborative piece, if you want, or project. So this work shifted continuously, and it like never settled. They leaked, refused closure. And this whole setup creates, I would say, like a particular kind of attention that people have to negotiate present, and they have to sense each other in the space and listen to the space with the bodies, and like not everything can be explained. And the main thing is the meaning has to be made through doing. And that whole project, or this whole set, raises some important questions that I think that sits on the center of my work. Like what happens when we release control of authorship, or space, or ourselves? What happens? What if an artwork is not a product, but a shared organism that changes with the people who meet it? And how do we create meaning together without hierarchy? So I understand this as self-organizing as artist practice, and it's also in a very direct way a rehearsal, I would say, for like democratic life. Because obviously democracy is not only voting or policy, but learning, let's say, how to make meaning together without knowing in advance where it would lead, or what it would lead to. yeah, I jumped from that project. I just put this picture in because it's so lovely. It was a workshop I did with kids to see how far we can push charcoal drawing, and yeah, you can push it all onto your whole body. We found anyway. So jumping to what Kate, you pronounce it very well, Kate. Lokalen Kulturverkstad, which I call a collective cultural ecosystem. And this is, of course, the space. I love these space maps, but that's a different thing. Lokalen is, well, it translates as the premises, which is a bit cocky. It's like, well, these are the only premises that exist in this town, basically. That's what we think. But in reality, it has more the meaning of like our place or our space. So this is a self-organized cultural space that I founded and then keep running with others, like collective volunteer-run fashion. It's situated here in Norrtälje on the ground floor of a residential building. So we have to constantly negotiate people that have flats around and this and that, which is a particular way of functioning. But Lokalen it's just a dull normal street, but it's grounded in, or we started as having this as our core of everything, that we grounded it in localness, friendliness, openness, accessibility, co-creation, and the freedom to try without the pressure to succeed with whatever we do in the space. So in Lokalen, the rooms and the relationships, we treat them as like shared materials. We have artist studios, meeting rooms, ceramic workshop, printmaking workshop, communal work, activity rooms, and a gallery. So artist, maker, participant, visitor, and organizer, these are positions that we move between rather than like fixed identities. So Lokalen is a place where people meet who might not otherwise meet, obviously, where things can happen that are not planned, or new worlds can be rehearsed, even if not only briefly. It starts sounding like some kind of poem here when I read it out. Anyway, so to create a space that is not driven by efficiency or evaluation of productivity is, I believe, political in itself. And for me, creating a space where people can meet, make, talk, rest, fail, try again, without the commercial or institutional pressure, it's already like a form of quiet resistance. So it would, yeah, I'd say it opens the possibility of imagining life differently. So, but with all that said, the maybe most important lesson is, and I know Kate like this part, is that I learned that there always has to be cake, whatever you do. Cake has to be there to provide happiness and an extra layer of, well, sugar, but icing as well. But on then to like a little bit of the bigger scope, like culture space as collective agency. Yeah, if you zoom out further, living in this like market-driven authoritarian forces, where authoritarian forces pushes towards individualization and standardization and isolation. These self-organized places, of course, offer some kind of different logic. With the belonging instead of separation, process instead of performance, relational value instead of like hard economic value. And here in Sweden, at least, historically, culture houses and what we call people's houses were not just like cultural venues, they were like infrastructure for building political imagination through everyday shared life. And people made sense of the world together in kitchen, rehearsal rooms, etc. Well, halls of gathering. So shared experience, people see as a material for transformation. So a bit of a tying it all together, that like play as a way of making futures. I should probably explain this picture. This is some large-scale puppets I worked with. I thought this was a good to end with these puppet pictures, because it's such a good picture for also kind of subversive political art. But puppets are also good for doing and for playing and for taking part. So these ones are like, yeah, a bit larger than life size, and the strings go up in the ceiling and then down again. So when you stand and pull you're allowed as a visitor to the gallery, pull the strings and kind of dance with the puppet, so it moves in the same way as you do, which is, some people find these puppets really scary. But so then play as a way of making futures, like play I see is not a retreat from reality, it's rather like a way of rehearsing another reality. So when we play together, we reorganize power, we suspend expectations, we allow imagination to expand, and to self-organize, then to act on the belief that the world can be built differently, because if you don't believe that, you wouldn't do it. So not in the future, but now. So even in here, I managed to detangle the thread. So here the puppets are up, standing up. Anyway, to do that even in like small rooms or with modest materials or with the people who are present. So, for example, Lokalen and the Leaping Circus project, they are not finished project or entities or structures, and they're not meant to be. They remain like open and alive. So if we can learn to create even very small spaces of like care, curiosity, and shared imagination, I think we're already practicing other futures in the present. And I would like to kind of end with a bit of a question, like what could happen if we treated our spaces and our relationships as unfinished worlds that we're building together. Yeah, that was it. These are the puppets when someone is pulling them. I finished there. I don't have a good end slide.
But that was an excellent ending, Helen.
Yeah,
that was
cool.
a really important question. Yeah, fantastic.
I thought it's good. Someone told me it's good to end with a question, so I thought I'll do that.
Yeah, really great. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I think we're going to keep questions to the end. I should have clarified that initially. I'm monitoring the chat, so if you do have questions, you can put them in the chat as we go. But we're going to have space for questions and comments, conversation at the end of the session as well. So if it's all right with everybody, I will hand over to Alan for the can you share your screen trial?
Yeah, thanks, Kate, and thanks, Helen, and thanks to Ljubljana, of course, for putting all of this on, and all of the projects that are happening, the speakers and the people and the lands that they represent, and of course the people for coming to listen to us and hear what we have to say. So thanks very much for coming. Let's give this share screen a try. How's that? Yeah, okay.
Perfect. This works.
Great. Okay, so that's me. That's the center, and this is the talk we're doing. And I kind of, hang on a minute. Sorry. I've kind of given us a bit of a roadmap. So today, I'm from a farming background. I've had no I haven't been to any schools since high school. So everything I've done has been through just trying things out. And so I'm quite naive when it comes to the university system and that kind of thing. But I do have lots of friends who work in it, and I'm totally amazed by all the things that happen. I've become obsessed by landscape fire. The centre is something I've set up as a part of that. It's led to an amazing artist residency. We're doing artist workshops, a connection with Meta Label, who are a distribution partner. formation of something called Super Lab, and then the other big project, or the project which I think has great scope to become really interesting, is called Mother Nature. So I'm going to try and get through all of that if I can. Here we go. Hold on. So the first question is, a friend of mine, Simon. He often asks me, so what is art? And over the decades, there's been art as ecology, art as activism, art as healing, art as participation. But maybe art's not even an object or an idea. Maybe it's just about putting time to something that you really love and you're really passionate about it. And then it sort of reveals itself to you after you've been through some trials and disappointments and experimentation. So I quite like to maybe even remove the word art and think about think about scale, or a different kind of scale. And so the reason I started thinking about scale is because of this project, which I'm going to show you now. And it was the 2016 Horse River fire. According to Stephen Pine, it's sort of gathering of these three things that kind of happened at the same time. I managed to get some funding, and I'm going to take you through some aerial shots now, or some satellite images, which show the beginning stages of that. So this is the day before the fire, May 2. Well, it's actually not the day before the fire, it's the day of the fire. But at this stage, it's a wildfire. It's in the forest, and it's on the outskirts of town. So that's about, your screen's about 25 kilometers across there. So that's London to Heathrow Airport, or Auckland CBD to Auckland Airport as well. This is in false color. So you can see there the burn scar. You can see how it looks to me like the wind is coming from the left there. Smoke's going kind of northwest, and the fire seems to be heading away from town. So this is so everyone in the town was aware of the fire, and then suddenly it changed very rapidly, and this is it changed from a wildfire into a conflagration, which is when a fire goes into an urban environment. So that's a few days later. And you can see, unlike a lot of the fire imagery you'll see in town, on the news, this fire just went right through the middle of Fort McMurray. And it got to a scale we call the pyro-CB. That's a fire which generates its own lightning storms at the top of it. It's just so immense, you simply can't put them out. And this thing happened right on the edge of their town, causing a mass evacuation of 90,000 people in one afternoon. And you can probably just make out the main arterial route through the middle of the town there. So that the scale there, you're looking about 35 kilometers across. And then this is July 1, so about just over a month later. And that would be the equivalent of going, say, from Charing Cross to the screen width there is, say, Charing Cross to Coventry across. So that's the size of this fire. And of course, this is a fiery environment. It's a fiery landscape, has been for several thousand years. And at the top of your screen there, you'll see an open cast mine. And that's talling ponds. It's not the mining itself, but that's why you've got this high population of people living up there. And that's kind of what drew me to this, because I thought, what's going to happen to this town now that they've had this sort of destruction of many houses and homes? So that kind of drew me in. That'll give you an idea of what it looks like from the ground. That's the evacuation road there. So that was jammed to a standstill for 5 hours. Everybody got through. Nobody died from the fire. Everybody got out. So that's a real testament to the people who live there. I don't know if I've got much time for this slide, but it's sort of looking at how when I got into this, there was a long period of really nothing much happening. And I was very uncertain about what to be doing next. And I didn't really understand fire that well. So I went off and did more work in Australia, in Greece, and other areas to try and build up my knowledge on fire, as well as build this body of work. And then COVID hit, and this is what kind of really shaped things, because I managed to get some funding to help young people between the ages of 18 and 24. And I thought, rather than getting lots of young photographers, I'll get a range of different people involved. So an anthropologist, someone who just got a literature degree. We had a designer and 2 data scientists. So the satellite imagery that you have been looking at was done by the 2 data scientists that worked with me during this time. So that's their input into it. And the anthropologist saw this book and she said, well, why don't we send this back to Fort McMurray and see what they think of it? So that was a really brilliant thing to do. And this is the outcome there. So Emma sent off the books, we got the feedback, and we got these eyewitness statements about the fire and how people felt about them and what was going on. So it opened up a whole other aspect of that the photography just wasn't doing. And then Antoinette Johnson, who I'm so proud of her, she's now doing a PhD at Oxford, and she's managed to raise, she has a family with no money. She's managed to raise like 50,000 or something like that to get herself into this PhD. So she wrote this incredible essay, and it's all sort of come together. And this is the data science part here. So we can look at, and this sort of, again, it's sort of a scale question. There's so much fire happening around the globe at the moment. You've kind of got to stand back from it and take a look at it from space. So it's a really handy tool. I'll just flick through these quickly because this is what it looks like on the ground 6 months after the fire. And this is so I won't go into too much detail on these, but you can see how unstable it's become. And that's the book as it stands at the moment. And that's, I think, the 4th draft. And it contains these 4 perspectives: the photographer, the lived experience from the community, what it looks like from space, and the voice of a young adult who's only ever known climate change. And I quite like putting all these 4 things into the book. And it's been really rewarding, actually. And next year is the 10-year anniversary. So we've got an exhibition up there next year, which I'm going to gift the first copies of the book back to the community, and then restart this process of doing more photography 10 years later, which I think is probably going to be the time when I'll get to answer the question that I had at the beginning, like, what is it going to look like? How are people going to respond? What's the adaptation going to be like? So that's pretty exciting. And then, of course, looking at scale, I started to get a sense of just how the boreal forest was changing and heating up. And the amount of fire and what the scientists were telling me about it, and people on the ground. And when 2023 hit, it was just completely extraordinary. And so I again used the data, the software that Mo and Ares had built to start mapping out these fires that were breaking out right across Canada. And I used the models by Will Stephan, who I actually had the pleasure to meet in Canberra a couple of times. And these are planetary boundaries, which is a different way of looking at the world. So I shaped these, I shaped the images into sort of mini worlds, if you like, to suit that, or to go with that data they were bringing back. And that there, what you're looking at there is see how the top of the cloud is white? That's vapor. And it's very different from the black smoke underneath. So when you see that, that's a typical sign of a pyro-CB. Fort McMurray was 1 pyro-CB. In the lifetime of a fire scientist, a pyrocologist, maybe up till maybe 10 years ago, you'd be lucky to see 1. Canada had 147 in that 1 year. Which is just absolutely gets me going, when these things happen. And it's very difficult sometimes to come back to normal life after experiencing these things. So that's something like 6.5 times the normal burn area for Canada. So we're onto something. It's big, and that's why I'm thinking I can't do anything by myself. I need to have other people around me to kind of work through this. So I've gone ahead and created a studio as a social space. That's a bit of a work in progress. I've got a distribution partner with Meta Label, and publishing on Substack, which I'm finding quite useful as well. So this is where I invite other people to come in and work on their projects. It's never as clean as this. This is it doesn't look anything like this at the moment. But yeah, the idea is for experimentation with photography. This is the Center for Ecological Philosophy. This is where we're publishing our articles. And this is the distribution for, so looking at the artist economy, or looking at a resilient artist economy, and how we can be making more things to going outside of funding or having to have a job to do what we want to do. So that's really at the heart of this. And the funding model, the model inside inside the meta label. Sorry, let me just check something here. Yeah, sorry, it's just off my screen. So in the bottom right-hand corner, that's meta label. So that enables us to publish collaboratively. So let's say there are 4 or 5 of us that want to do a book. We can put the book together, and then as the book sells, we get a share of the money that's coming through as it's happening. So it's a new model. And it's done by a sort of artist advocate and entrepreneur, Yancey Strickler, who set up Kickstarter maybe 15 years ago. And this could have coincided with the COVID grant. So I just happened to be, having these people around me, and Yancey setting up this thing, which is all about working together. How can we work together as artists rather than the sort of single artist model? So, and the last project I'd like to share is something called Nature Mother. This is a bit fledgling, but we're getting it underway. It's a huge project to create an atlas of landscape songs and stories. It's a language change that negates geopolitics, and it's a way of looking at the world according to natural law. And what I mean by that is sort of laws that are unchanging and that, or less changing than human laws. So we're gathering projects at the moment. We've got the first 23 coming through, and then another 23 in the pipeline. We're borrowing things like peer review from the academic line, and we're trying to, we're working on artist economy and valuing the artist knowledge and experience. And that's really everything. I think I've probably raced through that really quickly. But if you do have any questions or about any of the work, I'd be happy to talk to you about it. The fire project itself has 3 separate categories. Catastrophic fire, that's the element in the Canada part, but I don't really want to stick with catastrophe. So there's a huge section on regenerative fire, which I'm working on in Australia, and that's working with Indigenous stakeholders. And the third part is spiritual or embodied fire. And the places I've been working on are Portugal, Australia, UK, Aotearoa, New Zealand, Turkey, Canada, USA, and Greece. So it's slowly building up. But the next step is going to be next year, taking the project back to Canada. So that'd be exciting. And I sort of see the future as a little bit like that orange circle that's been moving through the presentation. It's held in scale. It's a dot, and it's the past, and it's the present, and it's the future. It's sort of in one right there, and I can see a natural abundance returning through the next generations with their will. I can see the younger people I'm meeting with along climate. They're really empowered now to do something about this, and I see people saying no to ideas of change, no to ideas of hope, and saying yes to responsibility and taking care of our place and taking care of our waters and taking care of our mountains. Thank you very much.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Alan. Thank you. You've given us a lot to think about there. Both Alan and Helen were like bang on time, by the way. I'm sitting here with my stopwatch, but that was exactly 15 minutes, Alan. So Perfect. I think not everyone could see, like it's sorted now by the looks of it, but not everyone could see those photos. So just to remind everyone that it's being recorded, so you'll be able to see all the presentations. Yeah, as I saw it, I think, like which did include the photos, but certainly I'm sure that both Helen and Alan, and no doubt Neil and Barry as well, if you'd like to get in touch with them, we can circulate emails afterwards and stuff like that. Right, so. Yeah, brilliant. But thank you. I have lots of questions written down, particularly about scale, which, speaking as a geographer, is one of my favourite things. And I think you really captured that brilliantly with that orange circle. It's really interesting. But before I get on to that, I'll hand over to Neil and Barry. If you can share your screen. Brilliant.
Just a second. Is it full screen? Sorry. Yes. Excuse me for my back throat, just a bit. So if you can't hear me, just let me know. But I'm very happy to join the panel, and it's amazing to hear Alan and Helen this morning. I'm Nilambari Falke. I am a visual artist and researcher in human geography, environmental science, and sociology, as Kate just said. Over 15 years, I've been deeply immersed in academia. So my talk will be a bit academic and artist mix. It's because I cannot leave both. So it is going to be like that. So as we, from the first two talks, and especially Alan's talk, we realize that we live in a very volatile age today, where geographical, geopolitical conflicts, we have pandemics, we have severe disasters affecting our communities and nations, constantly disrupting our systems. This volatility, I think, demands a disciplined response in a way, even though as artists, of course, academics do address it in a very disciplined way, but also artists need to probably do the same. Because institutions overwhelmingly rely on data-driven frameworks designed for measurements, prediction, and control. And we know that that's not kind of working right now, because how much can you control and how much data can you have? These frameworks excel at quantifying the threats, as we know. They identify the risks that we are going to have. But at one hand, they're powerful tools for state and security and institutional knowledges, because they seek a stable world for us, right? They look for a stable world for us. But this is where my research and artistic practice begins. I kind of move away from this models of threats, and look at the complexity of community resilience. What are we going to do of ordinary people and places, which are very important at macro level, actually, and how do they actually survive this? That is more important. And the data provides overall likelihood to us, the impacts of it, but it doesn't transmit the texture of living with uncertainty, the quiet dignity of adaptation and resilience of communities around the world, or the emotional, embodied, or sensory reality of our changing world. If we do not communicate that through data, right? So I realized that my questions needed a different language, and I come from extremely academic background. Not one that seeks to define or conclude, that we always seek to have a conclusion, but one that seeks to convey and listen to people and communities. To micro practices of survival, which for me is extremely important, because it's a matter of survival for people at the end of it. So the transition was a search for a more potent form of inquiry. And one recognizes that humans are not the sole actors in this circle and resilience. We, of course, have found that we need to build this relationship with communities and others in our environment. So I look at art as an inquiry in the changing world. So yet after all this time, I found myself increasingly drawn to the questions of policy, data, and all that utility simply couldn't answer, as I said. So It could give us the CO2 concentrations, projected sea level rises, but it couldn't convey, as I said, the textures. So I moved on to painting, sound, and uh, collective making process, which offered me a process of knowing that is non-linear, that is affective, which is more than verbal, that wasn't abandonment of research for me, uh, but a search for more different kind of inquiries. So my approach here aligns with affect theory or embodied geographies, which foreground how emotions, sensation, and rhythms shape knowledge. They legitimize the texture of resilience. The bodily ways of uh, uncertainty is a vital form of knowledge here for me. Uh, sorry, I'm kind of struggling with my throat. I'm so sorry about this.
Take your time, Neil and Barry.
Yeah,
Don't
yeah,
worry.
I will. Sorry. So art as an inquiry, I said, I look at it as a power of process. So in my practice, I treat not art as not as representation, but as inquiry, I said. It's not about making a pretty picture of climate crisis, but it is about using the process of art to think through it. So whether I'm working with watercolors, manipulating sound, or using field recordings, I use these materials more to listen to the rhythms of the environment, the silences of displacement in migration, for example, or the residues of resilience within communities. So this resonates with the ideas of if I connect it with science and technological studies, particularly Bruno Latour's distinction between matter of fact and matters of concern. So instead of isolating facts about the world, I look at artistic inquiry, engages it with in a living network of concerns, right? So which are messy, relational, and are contingent. So like Latour, I see inquiry as a process of sense making rather than the pursuit of a closure or a conclusion, you know. So art becomes a way of processing uncertainty, of staying with complexity when conventional language begins to fail, in this case data sets and rigorous work or research which let us know about CO2 but doesn't know what can we do with it with communities. So the blank canvas or the empty audio track don't demand a neat data or data driven answers. They invite ambiguity and also multiplicity, and that is the beauty that I really get attracted to while mixing these two things. For me, this is where I see becomes a form of power, this entire toolkit, but it's radically different. So it's not the power to dominate, conclude, or control a narrative, but it is the power to hold space for things that are messy, contradictory, and evolving. Drawing from new materialism, power is viewed not as hierarchical, but as distributed. So it circulates amongst humans, materials, infrastructures, and ecologies. Its availability to stay with complex rather than to simplify it is probably a way for us to go forward, I feel, in how we distribute agency amongst communities when we need to solve such volatile worlds that we are facing, right? So this allows us, why I see art as inquiries also, it allows us to imagine futures that are not fixed. You know, we don't know our future is. So there are no predictable endpoints. We don't know where, how, and where we will be, but as a process of becoming. So I think art can show us there is a way to become, and it's not necessarily one right or one wrong way of becoming. So if you move from asking, like I said, what is the future, to how are we becoming the future? Like right now, through our attention and through our actions, I think is the way that we probably will go ahead with it. Uh, uh, Here, I want to bring in two of the works that I have done. I'm calling them case studies with lack of imagination as as a academic. Could have said project 1, project 2, but case study 1, case study 2. So case studies are like, so I'm talking about disruption and reorganizing attention within art, and I'll talk about one work I did on well, just go back a bit. So many of my projects actually seek to reorganize how we pay attention. So most of the projects I do are about thinking different ways of bringing in that. So shifting the spotlight from grand global crisis to subtle local entanglements we share with more than human world. So I think that art as a soft technology of attention, uh, a way of cultivating sensitivity to what usually remains unseen or unheard. So I think that is kind of my focus of most of the projects I do. Case study 1, which is a Spawn City series, which I did last year as part of K11 Foundation residency in Wuhan in China. And I developed the Spawn City series, like many rapidly growing urban centers, deals with intense pressure from flooding, and especially the cities along the Yangtze River are prone to flooding in China. It's the largest river in the country. So the Spawn City concept is a design strategy. It's a technological strategy or fix to flooding. But can city behave like a sponge, absorbing rainwater, redistributing it, and adapting to floods? I explored this through layered ink paintings and manipulated soundscapes. Resilience here I framed as porosity, not resistance, because water doesn't like resistance. It will flow irrespective of whatever you put on it. So I invited viewers to listen differently to the hidden infrastructure of water, to the politics, what flows within that strategy of flood resilience. The process made the non-human agency of water felt. This is what I kind of had experienced myself. Uh, a direct reflection, I would say, of Jane Bennett's concept of vibrant matter, where material forces themselves are active participants in shaping the world. So here I see the strategy of using concrete infrastructure or changes in the river system as the agent of change within that. The second case study is Siku series. Siku is ice in Inuit language, and this I presented in Bilbao as part of the Glaciological Society. And I made a set of 3 paintings where I focused on glacial and polar research. And I wasn't just painting icebergs, I was translating ice data, memory, and field notes into visual language. So Imanak, which is the first painting from my left to your right, I don't know, from my left, is actually based on Dr. Faria's paper of ice cores, which I took and then painted them in this, and they actually look like this. So I've kind of tried to mix scientific information and data into painting, remaining true to the science, but remaining also true to the art, which is not that easy always. So by putting them in a conversation, the series aims to expand our collective imagination of climate futures beyond just the scientific graph, right? Because we need to move away from that, because we know that graphs aren't talking to many people. So this also, if I want to connect it where it's grounded, it's on Donna Haraway's notion of situated knowledges, that all knowledge is partial and relational, and asks, what if deepest knowledge of the planet lies in the synthesis of data we measure or the stories we live? So what do we do between these two? So so these processes, we've seen that, it unsettle conventional notions of power and value. So in economic terms, power implies control. But in ecological and artistic terms, power is distributed. It's not hierarchical or anything. It's distributed amongst things. It circulates, as I said, with relationships between soil and seed, artist and audience, city and river, name it, and it's between these people, right? So artistic collaboration then becomes a form of exchange, which I see is non-transactional and more relational. So I'll give an example of the kind of work we do in Birmingham as part of Culture Declares Emergency, which I am part of in United Kingdom. And we have a center called Washwood Heath Adaptation and Sustainability Hub, where we work with South Asian communities. We use creative practices to rethink adaptation. This isn't a workshop on climate change or something that we do, but it's a process of making with. So it is storytelling, gardening, or material experimentation, I think similar to what Helen does in Sweden. So this aligns with and grounded in critical geographies, which views creativity as a world-making practice. Futures are not predicted, they are enacted through relationships and shared labor. Here we see it in terms of value of making with others as a kind of shared labor. We're looking at futures. So, sorry. These small encounters, when we generate new publics and new forms of shared values we talked about earlier, that don't rely on markets or policies, but on connection, care, and imagination. As Alan said in his talk, it's about connection, care, and imagination and reciprocity, right? So this I call witness, because it challenges the hierarchical structure that defines whose knowledge counts. So in collective making, everyone becomes a participant. Artist is not an authority, but a facilitator of this relationship. You are not a passive subject of the crisis, you're an active part of adaptation. I think this is what we need to empower our communities with, that they are active part of adaptation and not just passive subject of the polycrisis or crisis that we talk about. Sorry. This is the last slide, so I can rest. So for when this panel came about, for me, I was thinking, what does reimagining futures mean to me? And I feel that it is not about predicting what's next. It's about noticing that is already emerging at the edges, the slow gestures of repair, the minor acts of care for each other, the porous structures that quietly hold us without knowing. And art, I think, gives us the tool to perceive these small distributed powers, to cultivate them. I see it like art as an inquiry, as also an invitation to unlearn mastery and instead dwell on reciprocity. And I'm doing that in the sense of moving from academia to artistic practice. It's unlearning all the 15 plus years of mastery, but to now move more towards reciprocity, because I was taking extraction, but I wasn't able to give back as much as I wanted, right? So I think here I feel that I'm able to do that in a way. So this thought is deeply informed by Haraway's idea of staying with the trouble for me, in the sense of that the way forward is not to seek escape or solution, but to remain engaged with the complexities of our shared world. So when I think of reimagining power, I imagine it is kind of listening, which we have kind of forgotten to listen, a distributed collective attention that we can then reorganize how we see and relate to the world. Because many a times, even in conversations, we listen to respond, we listen to, argue, we listen to, other things, but we don't listen for the sake of listening to the world. So through art as a process, we don't just depict alternative futures, but I think in my case, or maybe we should begin to just practice it, then maybe we have a future. So thank you so much.
Brilliant. Thank you, Neil and Barry. And thank you for staying with the trouble of your cough as well. But came across brilliantly. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, great. I can't thank you all enough for being perfectly on time. So we've got a nice amount of time for discussion as well. And I can see we've got a lot of people here. So if you'd like, if everyone would like, you don't have to, but everybody would like to turn on their cameras. I've gone up to view in the top right of my Zoom and put it on gallery view. So I can now see everybody, regardless of who's speaking, if you see what I mean. But I thought I've written down a whole list of themes that I think you've all covered and that bring it together. And just briefly, I think we've had some really enlightened and insightful thinking on process, on scale, on multiplicity and ambiguity, which again, just the reason I picked up on that, I think it came through in everyone's talk, was whenever I'm trying to crowbar a real experience into language that I've got to write down, else I lose my job. That multiplicity, that ambiguity, that complexity, the relationality, everything you've all talked about is lost. And I think that's what you've been able to bring is a language that does that justice, but also the oh, I don't want to go on too much. Just the absolute beauty that you presented, and also the way that you've all created spaces very explicitly, all created institutions. And I think that brings a reality to those ideas of relationality, of process, of witness, really responds to Helen's question of what would happen if we treated our spaces and our relationships as embodied worlds which we are building together, which if we can scale that or throw out the idea of scale somehow, I think would, yeah, really make the world rather lovely. But we'll see if that can happen. But before I go off on my thoughts, I'd like to invite Helen, Alan, and Neil and Barry if you've got any questions for each other or any comments on each other's talks. Helen,
Could I just ask like a comment to what you said with the crowbarring in? I think the thing is that we start in different starting points. You know, I can't speak for Neil, Barry, and Alan, but I start in the doing, and then I maybe add words onto it when I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing, while you come from the other side, perhaps. Just as a short note when you were saying that.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Again, it's that left brain, right brain, which is gloriously simplistic, and I know everything that's wrong with it, but it's, yeah, those different starting points. But yes, but yeah, thank you. That makes me feel a bit better though. But yeah, any other comments from Alan or Neil and Barry or yeah, Alan? Yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the losing control element that Helen brought in with those people in the kind of overalls and the markings that were being made. Empty space, not planning, and not planning is pretty fantastic actually when you get into it, because wonderful things really come out. So I really enjoyed hearing about that, and then this beautiful, I thought, it's so obvious in a way, but the way natural systems distribute or circulate power, I thought that was really lovely to hear, because the solution, if you like, is right there. You know, how separate systems or organizations or plant animal life distribute things between each other. Yeah, so I like that. Plus, every time I hear the word texture, I think it gets me going. So yeah, that's I guess that's my kind of highlights, yeah, or things that kind of caught my attention. Yeah, thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Thank you. Neil and Barry, anything else? Oh, Helen, got your hand up?
Sorry, did you want to say something, Neil and Barry? I don't want to.
I have questions, but you can go ahead. I'll wait.
Yes, no, I had a bit of a question for you, or a bit of something that I struggle with because of your work. It's like when you talked about this distribute agency in the communities. I need to keep my notes here.
Yes.
And so about the distributing or circulate like agency.
Yeah.
When and how to do that when or if no one is in control, which is the idea of the non-hierarchical community. So what about the like animateur or the facilitator, the like gathering? How do you
Yes,
think about that?
I think about is that here as artist I see as a facilitator, because somebody has to, I'm not saying herd the sheep, but in a case of like somebody has to push something ahead. So I think in that case, or it can be an open invitation to lead as well. The artist can even call somebody to take a lead. You don't have to, but somebody has to put the seed first anyway. So it has to be either the artist or it has to come directly from the community, which is not always easy. So in terms of what we do in wash heat community is like the women of South Asian culture, especially, we talk to are from Pakistan, not very vocal and not so much out connected to the outside community, are very hard to, and also language barriers, are not able to say things the way we think, or express themselves, just put it plainly. So I think in that case, artist becomes that facilitator, but you can open the invitation for somebody to take it. Then it becomes completely out. And then there's no control, as in your practice, where you see it just goes the way it becomes intuitive, it drives its own car in a way. So I think you have to let go. Letting go is very hard for people. So even artists, artist egos are big as well. So you just need to, academics is even higher, but it's like you have to let go, and letting go is something I think artists or anybody or facilitator has to learn. And I think that is one difficulty I've found, is that whenever I'm collaborating with somebody, not everybody is ready to give up. So I think that is one we have to negotiate quite a lot. But I think once you find your tribe, the right people, they know you're not in for something, and it doesn't need to be Neil Ambry's project, or it doesn't have to be Helen's project. Then I think it works better. So
No, because it's hard. I
yes,
have this thing that tell myself that I have to stop nudging
yes,
and really allow, because of course we have an image of maybe what we imagine it could be,
yes,
whatever we do, but then allow it to not be that at all.
yes.
It's
I many
difficult.
a times I just walk out of the room as well,
Mm.
because removing yourself is the best thing if you don't have self-control. And I think initially I didn't have it, so I just leave the room, have a coffee. I mean, you sometimes have to bash yourself and say, hey, hello, remember why you're here, right?
Mm.
So I think before somebody else does it, you just slap yourself, I think. So I think it's better to do it that way. Just remove yourself and leave and observe from outside. I mean, it's also fun to see from the window or a door. I mean, there
Can
are
I just
ways
come
you
in
can
there?
do it. Sorry?
Sorry, can I just come in there? Because it struck
Yeah.
me, like I've been to Lokalen in Sweden. It struck me what you were saying about play and pedagogy, basically, and that the fact that you can't translate play in the same way to English. I think that's completely fascinating. But good teaching is facilitating, and I quite often it's almost with experience you realize the value of leaving the room. Actually, a
Yeah.
good class is when you haven't said anything. Like that means you've set it. It takes a lot of work to achieve that, but it's like. But I was thinking when Helen was talking about play and also how scary the puppets were, like, and they are like the uncanny, like the Freud involved in puppetry. I mean, I'm not qualified to make any further comments there, like, but that I can imagine it's a really psychological process. But I think that something that art and creativity can facilitate, but also requires, is that you're really getting over your own shame about things. Like, and when you feel comfortable enough to be creative in the kind of spaces that you've all created, like, I think it's a wonderful thing to be able to achieve, I think. Like, and to be able to give that to people, like that they do feel confident enough to play with the puppets or engage with, some really complex ideas that Neil Ambari was talking about. But you've clearly created a space where, yeah, how do you, it's one of the things I wrote down where ordinary like people have the power, that they've got the agency there. And I think that's something that art is incredibly skilled at.
But also, you know, can I add something here? I also feel that as grown-ups, we've forgotten how to play. We just don't play like kids do. I mean, we need to waste time, roll around. I mean, unless you do that, I think it's very unlikely that you're going to see, you know, the fun of it. I think we have to, here I've said, so unlearn things is to learn play as well. I think we forget the joy of play, I think. Yeah, I kind of feel that, but I don't know. So I think that could be one exercise, is to introduce play again. And I think it's a good thing, Helen, what you're doing. I think I'm impressed.
Oh no, I think it's super important, and
Yes.
people do respond. Like Kate was saying, the puppets I think are the easiest picture of having people to engage, and people do engage much quicker than I thought they would, because you know, in a gallery people are a bit aware you can't touch things, but as soon as they realize, and I had to stop some little ladies from literally hanging in the threads, kind of destroying the puppets, almost like, okay, you're playing, you have fun, but calm down, you know.
Okay.
So it really, people really go for it when they're allowed to do it. Wonderful.
You said you had questions, Neil and Murray.
Yes, so I had one question for Helen. So I wanted to ask you, like, do you have any example of a time when you know, when the process of your site-specific co-creation, in maybe in Lokalen or anything, generated like an unintended political outcome? Because I'm not able to see if I'm able to do that. So, you know, I'm wondering whether you have seen kind of an outcome where that went beyond your goal of the exercise. So could you, like, you could see maybe from the feedback of the people or general conversation that the outcome was something else.
To give Helen a bit of time to think about that, because that's a complicated one. Did you say you had another question as well?
Or similar question for Alan as well, because you know, his work largely I see is like unsettled, extractive ways of seeing, and I wanted to ask him that how he sees image making, uh, specifically the challenge of visual and philosophical foundations for extractive economy. So how does it help people to see non-extractive economies as a viable way of doing things in our world? Because many a times my goal is to say, yeah, I'm doing this because I want to do this, but when I ask people, it's completely flat. So have you seen it in your work, like where people have responded and they've understood that there are non-extractive economies and they are good or something like that? So these two questions. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
who'd like to come in?
Okay.
Helen?
Yes. Well, I do really have. I don't know if it's hopeful or sad answer to that. We've had this project at Lokalen that is based a bit more open. We call it open Lokalen, and where you can come and do one afternoon a week and do a practical session. One of the artists, and we do something. And I had all these great ideas about art and we're doing and this and everything we've been talking about. But then this little lady came in and kind of asked if she were allowed to come in. And I said, yes, it's open, come in. And we're doing a collage today, come and join in. And she was like, oh, no, so I don't have to pay anything. And I don't have to like do anything. I said, no, come, we have coffee. You can just sit if you want. And she just like almost froze and said, oh, so is it true I can be here? I'm so lonely. And then it hits me like it's more actually about people just, I mean, even if I talk about it, but that was really hit home that it was just about being allowed to come and sit and be with people without paying or going to restaurants or going shopping or whatever. And it was that simple. So that really went beyond what I had been thinking. It was quite amazing. Then sometimes no one come at all, so it's the opposite. But that was, you know, quite strong.
Great, thanks. Alan?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's good, very good question, particularly for photography, I think, which has a long history of parachuting and extraction and that kind of thing. And I certainly arrived, you know, in a town which I had very little knowledge about. But I had recently read an essay by Martha Rosler called there's a 1960s essay which talks about gosh, I'm not going to remember the name of it now, but it's in and around documentary photography, something like that. I can get you the name later, but she talks very much about the history of photography going into areas and coming out, and she calls for something called a radical documentary, which gets rid of that extraction process and probably aligns really very well with the staying with the trouble idea. So that was at the beginning of the project. That was very much in my mind at the beginning of the project. So when I'm making, and I think the hard thing is, okay, who are you making the pictures for? And actually, when you go, well, when the pictures in the books are for the people who went through the fire, the language changes completely. So you're not having to explain things or describe them to people who have been there. So it's much more. So that was the idea of sending the first book back. So like, well, is this book helpful? Have we made a book that's helpful for those who've been through the fire or the evacuation and the recovery, the whole process? And you know, there was some objections, and then there was some feedback, and now we're, you know, 10 years down the line. So, and we're at it's a really difficult stage. Not difficult, but it's the thing about and it's like anywhere where your landscape's been completely obliterated. It's every time you walk out the door, you're reminded about what happened on that day, and so it's the trauma level is incredibly high. So we're going back to Fort McMurray to present the next book directly to them as a gift. And we're going to have a celebration, but you know, we're talking to the mayor's office, we're talking to various organizations, and it's just such a touchy subject. It's no one really knows quite what to do. So I think I'm not afraid of a bit of, well, let's just do it and have good intention. Say, well, look, this is meant to be a gift to help you through the times, and I think if we can follow that up with more photography 10 years later, then it's part of that rebuilding and part of that healing and part of that adaptation. So yeah, and then it's always been on my mind, like how can I so I guess in that regard, I didn't really push having the project published in The Guardian or try to get it into various, you know, places that have this very strict editorial control about what they want and how you need to describe it and tell us all about the drama, you know.
Yeah, got it. Brilliant. Thank you. I'm not sure how much longer we've got left. I think it's at least 8 minutes. But are there any other, would anybody else like to comments, questions? If you either physically put up your hand, I can see Helen's chomping at the bit there. Go ahead, Helen.
Yeah, sorry, I just have to tell Alan, like those burnt tree photos are just so amazing. And I've been thinking you said a little bit about it now, but you know, it's such a primal feeling of looking at when you see burnt trees, especially, like it's primal fear kind of thing somehow. But it's also like burnt wood gives way to new life kind of thing. So is there a sense of that there is kind of something hopeful in that somewhere? I mean, you're saying you go there and take new pictures, but in the community, if we somewhere seen like, well, we can actually make new things happen, or sorry, that wasn't really a question. I just really wanted to say those photos are amazing. They're very impactful.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, that was a particularly, you know, everyone, the fire was one thing, but the evacuation was another. And the fact that they just had to drop everything and go in one afternoon made it a very difficult and horrifying experience. And there's something that so but I guess going in there I was quite naive, and I had to everything, and I sort of had this idea of a story that I wanted to make, and then it just changed over time because I was meeting people and seeing just how thick the trauma was. And, you know, when I show the pictures to the community, or a couple of people in particular, you know, the really burnt out scenes are, they're kind of part of their history now, I suppose. So it's yeah, I don't know if that's really explaining it very well, but I think that there's a sort of there's a very, when you're there and you're in the middle of a forest that's just been heavily burnt, it's incredibly quiet, and that stays with you as well, you know. And it is that transition point where you're going from total destruction into a new beginning. So I think that sits with people. It certainly sat with me. You know, the heavier fires are, they're pretty chilling because of that quietness. So yeah, but I think as I say, as time goes by, I just don't want to stay with the catastrophe of fire. I think it's just one element of it. So hopefully this sort of deals with that. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions or comments they'd like to share? Yeah, so we've got Nervik.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a little comment as a person just entering the field, and then also coming from a South Asian background. It's really inspiring to see all of these projects, and also to sort of see the value in the field, because there's so much resistance going into the field of the arts, and there were so many amazing projects that also goes into the details of the inconclusivity of some projects, or when you're working with participatory methods. Sometimes there will be a situation where you're well, not sometimes, many times there will be a situation where you're a bit lost and you're not feeling like, is this productive? Are people really engaging, or are they interested, especially in a world as we've mentioned, that's so invested in efficiency and production and conclusions. It's really nice to see that there's so much amazing work that kind of shows you the value of it. And yeah, it was really inspiring, and it feels I feel like I really needed this to be and to hear these things from
That's why I put it together. Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. I can see Miranda's got her hand up. Miranda, if you can take yourself off mute. I don't think I can do it from here, but no. Or does anybody else have a question?
Hi, sorry, I didn't know how to unmute myself.
Yeah,
Sorry.
No, yep.
Okay, so I have two questions. One is for Nilambari. And so the first question is, when you, as you say, you remove yourself to kind of facilitate the process, how or when do you draw the line of, I need to direct this or steer this in this direction, like this is what we want to get, or you completely leave them out, and whatever comes out you respect and then you present it. That would be one for you, and the other one is for all of them, and is how do you financially bridge this implementation? Because as you well said, we work in a binary paradigm that only respects outcomes and like growth and all of that. So how do you present that to get the funds, or how do you make it work financially? Thank you. And now I'll try to silence myself, but I don't know how.
Okay, don't worry too much about it. I can just see we're about to run out of time, and I know Justin's got a question as well. I think we can stay on a little bit longer, like unless we get thrown out. So this might suddenly stop at 11:30. I don't know. If so, thank you to everybody, like for coming, for participating, and for the presentations. But Justin, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, it was more of an observation. So I said, maybe it's more important to think about that question, which I think was a really good question. My observation really was that what really came across for me from listening to all the presentations is just this kind of idea really of rethinking our value systems and rethinking what we value and how we value things. I think, the idea of just listening to others is really important. And when I've talked to Alan about the work, one thing that really surprised me is the fact that he got to a point in the project where he just asked the community what would be a good outcome for them. And then the photography kind of follows from there. And I think it's something that I just think is, I don't know how we get other people to think about these values and to follow in the train of maybe the way that artists are thinking about approaching these things. But I think this question of values is really important, like the things that, in our culture that are problematic, valuing or not valuing the right things perhaps. And that was just an observation more than a question.
Brilliant. Thank you, Justin. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Any responses to Miranda's question there?
Just jumping on the money thing. It's really tough. There's no way around it. But if you believe in it, you'll stick with it, and something good will happen. I don't know. That's how it is. But we're, I think the artist economy needs really spicing up a bit, and that's kind of up to us to do as well, to how we can shift it from either being an incredibly well-paid artist, like here, and then the millions of people underneath with 2 or 3 or 4 jobs working on really important stuff. So yeah, find a way. Just find a way. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah,
Helen?
I'd like to say, like, we have this little saying that our currency is our spare time. So basically an awful lot of like volunteer hours and hours, but we have to live as well. So it is, like Alan said, it's enormously difficult. You get very efficient. Everyone thinks artists are like up in there and thing, but every artist I know is incredibly efficient because there is no time to mess about. So, yeah.
No, excellent. Helen Barry, any comment on that?
Yeah, so the question you asked about when I remove myself and what's the right time. So I think before you start any session, and this is what I kind of do, always have a very clear vision and value, that who owns the project mission, and you take the input of the members at the onset of the work that you're doing. So the members become self-correcting agents themselves if anything happens or doesn't happen. I think that is the time, once the members have understood initially within 10 minutes what we are kind of achieving. If we want to have a goal, if we don't want to have a clear goal, then I think the end point doesn't matter, because you want it to evolve. That is also giving creative confidence to the participants, creative or any kind of agency. I think giving to the participant is important here, and I think that is where I get out of the way. And sometimes internally members also do their own projects, and it's okay, as long as they're doing it and They're understanding, because collaboration is organic. You can't have a forced collaboration, whether it's a project between artists or people you work with. About funding, I think most of the projects I have done have already were funded, and if are not funded, I have done it with people who have funding. Or I think most of the work, as Alan said, is volunteer free, and you just have to have a big heart and do it, and also believe in your work. I think I'll just give you an example. I applied for 12 years to do a PhD. In the 13th year, I got the PhD funding. So this is the kind of grit you need to have. If you don't have that kind of grit, I think forget about it. So I'm very blunt. I mean, you just have to keep going. I mean, the current funding I also got, I wrote this project for 2 years. I've spent 2 years on this project, in and out, day and night, breathing in, breathing out the words. And I think you just have to believe it. And I think the world understands you once you have the confidence to believe in your ideas. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, we better wind up, but thank you so much. So thank you, Helen. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Neil and Barry. Really, I can't thank you enough. That was really an absolutely fascinating, such an engaging session, and so clear. Everything that you're doing is really, yeah, really changing things. I'd love to have a follow-up on this to talk about, well, I don't really want to talk about research funding because it makes me cry, but that actually but that was a very positive note to end on, given that session. But I think there's so much that can be done when we pull together in these kind of sessions as well, and we are all in it together in many ways too. But yeah, I really can't thank you enough. The session has been recorded. I'll be circulating people's contact emails. Thank you so much for participating, and brilliant. I really hope we can do it again. I really hope so.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Kate.
Thank you.
Thanks for being us
Really my
together.
pleasure. Really my pleasure. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye. Okay, I'm just waiting till everyone has left. So yes, okay, but that was really good, Helen. Thank you. Thank you. It was really great. Okay, we'll speak soon. Yeah. Take care. Bye-bye.